The last item of business for us to take up today is the supplemental budget resolution. So this reflects the joint targets that were negotiated with the House and Senate and Governor that were released on Friday. So the budget resolution is just what we do to put into a resolution form what the joint target agreement was. And as we all know, we had the supplement or the main budget last year. And so this is just a reflection of our ongoing priorities and needs for the state that we see needing the continuation in our supplemental budget. And with that, what I will do is I will move the 2024 supplemental budget resolution, which is coded Bud Res 04 before the committee. And I'm going to have nonpartisan staff walk through this, and we'll do a screen share here so everybody can see what is also in your committee packet and online, but we'll also have a screen share. So Ms. Adrians, would you please walk through the budget resolution?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think Mr. Worth is going to start with the budget resolution document first. And I'll spend most of the time talking about the joint budget targets document, but I wanted to point out a few items on the actual budget resolution. So the first thing, the main thing that the budget resolution does can be seen on line 1.4, and this sets the overall limit of additional spending for the biennium in addition to what was enacted last session. So this amount is $512,544,000. The other things I would like to point out on line 1.6 and then on line 1.7, this is just, we do this every time there's a budget resolution. We just outline the amount of funding in the budget reserve account. That's set at just over $2.9 billion. And then the cash flow account is set at $350 million. And then on the second page, on lines 2.13 and 2.14, what this does is it sets additional spending limits for other funds. So the majority of the discussion will be about general fund spending for the Finance Committee targets, but this is setting a limit for the Healthcare Access Fund as well as the Workforce Development Fund. And with those amounts set at 0, that means that there cannot be additional spending out of these accounts for fiscal years 24 and 25. And so now if we can move to the joint budget targets document. What I will outline are all the amounts that are set for the different finance committees. And even though in the budget resolution, it only shows the limit set for 24 and 25, this document highlights the targets that were set for the tails as well, fiscal years 26 and 27. So just a reminder that we put these numbers there in thousands. I know that it can be easy to get tripped up on that. I do that myself. So I'll start on line 6. The agriculture target is just over $4.5 million in the first biennium, and in the tails, it's just over $2.5 million. For capital investment, there is an amount of $40 million for fiscal years 24 and 25. The Children and Families Committee, there's a target just over $34 million in the first biennium, and then $24.78 million in the second biennium. Climate and Energy on line 9 has a target of $1 million in the first biennium and 0 in the second. Commerce has a negative target of just under $5.5 million in fiscal years 24 and 25. And then in the tails, $1.738 million. Economic Development has a target of $1 million in the first biennium and 0 in the second. The Education Committee has a target of $43 million in the first biennium and just over $18 million in the second. Elections has $500,000 in the first biennium and $200,000 in the tails. Environment and Natural Resources has a target of $17 million in fiscal year 24 and 25 and 0 in the tails. The Health Finance Committee has $4.5 million in the first biennium and $5 million in the second. Higher Education has a target of $500,000 and 0 in the tails. The Housing Committee has $10 million in the first biennium and $1 million in the tails. Human Services has $42.13 million in the first biennium and just under $15 million in the tails. And I should have mentioned that these numbers are all in the budget resolution as well. I just like to provide this document to make it a little bit easier to see everything on a one piece of paper. Okay, so on line 19, the Judiciary Committee has a target of $36 million in the first biennium and $3 million in the tails. Labor and Industry has $1 million in the first biennium and $0 in the tails. The Legacy Committee does not use general fund, so their general fund target is 0 in both biennium. Public Safety has $17.9 million in the first biennium and $14.22 million in the second. The State Government Committee has $2.5 million in the first biennium and 0 in the second. For tax aids and credits, there's a target of $53 million set in the first biennium and $5.23 million set in the tails. The Transportation Committee has $2 million in general fund in the first biennium and 0 in the tails. Veterans and Military Affairs has 0 target in both biennium. Workforce Development has a 0 target in the first biennium and then a negative target of $4 million in the tails. And then listed as other items starting on line 31, this is money that is designated for things that would be outside of committee jurisdictions. So the first item is money set aside for a potential claims bill, and that amount is $200,000 one time in fiscal year 24 and 25. There's a line item for educator pensions. This amount doubles the governor's recommendation for one-time pension contribution holiday. The governor's recommendation was 0.25%, and this doubles it to 0.5%. On line 33, this is $16 million that's set aside to address issues with emergency medical services. On line 34, the House already passed House File 3769 for net operating loss, and so this sets aside $14.8 million to cover the cost of that bill. On line 35, the School Safety Center bill was already enacted, so it's now Chapter 78 in Laws 2024, and these are the amounts to cover the funding that was included in that bill. It's $640,000 in the first biennium and $980,000 in the tails. The Tyler settlement, this is it's a settlement that is being worked out between the counties and the state. And if it is to be enacted, the state would cover $109 million in the first biennium. And included in the terms of the settlement is that the state would cover ultimately 80% of the cost, and the counties would reimburse the state for around 20% of the cost. So the negative number in the tails reflects the revenue that the state would receive from the counties. And that this is an estimate that MMB provided us. So this is probably in flux, but it's about $26.7 million in the tails. And then we have an inflation estimate to cover the additional spending, and that is just over 1.8 million in the second biennium in 26 and 27. So with all of these changes, the total spending would amount to $477.5 million in the first biennium, and then just under $63 million in the second. And for those with eagle eyes, you'll notice that this total spending amount of $477 million is different than the $512 million that's outlined in the budget resolution. And what this lower amount shows us is this is the amount that was currently designated out of the overall limit of spending that is set in the budget resolution. And this is what has been agreed to by all of the leaders thus far. So there's a little bit of room in case there are additional bills or spending needs that come up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Adrians. And you have Owen took his screen down, but you have all that information posted online and in your packet. So questions to the budget resolution. Lead Garofalo, or we'll go to Representative Rarick and then Lead Garofalo. I'll come to you for final word, okay?
Yep, just go ahead and call in everyone else first, thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a concern. We had in the higher ed meeting quite a surprise. We did a foster grants program where foster kids here in Minnesota can go to school. Their tuition fees are paid, room and board is paid, and a few other things. And they had such an impact on, it had such an impact on foster kids that they doubled from the first number, or the first year to the second year, they doubled the numbers. And they're $5 million short. So we are going to be not providing the promise that we gave to them, because this is a really small target. This is $500,000. We need $5 million. I want to bring that up, and I don't know if Chair Pulowski has anything to say, or if he's going to do some other things to try to make these foster kids whole. But we heard quite a bit of testimony that now kids that had been made this promise could be homeless and other things as well. So I'm really hoping, I was hoping to see this budget resolution that would just take care of that, but I see that it has not. So I see Chair Pulowski has raised his hand, so I'll let him speak to that.
I will call on him. I will just note too, so we've given the targets out. Obviously, the chairs know what their spending is, and I'm going to let Representative Pulowski talk about it. But I will say just writ large that all of you on all of your committees with your chairs, you will be able to dive more deeply into, obviously our chairs just got this on Friday. So I'm not just speaking to higher ed, but all of the budgets. I think there's a lot to be discussed of to what will or won't be in those areas, and that will be within the prerogative of the chairs in this committees too. So just kind of saying that in general as the discussions have just begun. But to that, Representative Pulowski.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Rarick, as you know, we have another interesting change in higher ed. We have increases in enrollment, and I think partially due to what we passed last session with both the North Star Promise and freezing tuition. Those increases in enrollment have stressed any type of grant that we're giving out, including the foster care grant. We've been in negotiation with the Senate since we've seen these declines as that result, and hopefully we will have a budget bill that will resolve it. However, the only bill we've dealt with so far in higher ed is a policy bill.
Representative
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to emphasize the fact that we made promises to these foster kids. They took us up on the promise. They wanted to get educated, and now we've left them out in the cold again. Those are their words, not mine. So I really hope that there's some resolution coming forward, because we've got an awful lot of interest and it could be life-changing for these kids. So I just want to advocate for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Yep, Representative Pulowski.
Madam Chair, Representative Hicks in particular has been haunting my office for the past few weeks with a refrain that she needs $6 million. So long before Representative Rarick made these comments in committee or in this committee, Representative Hicks in particular should be given credit to raising the issue to a critical task. And it is one of the high priorities of higher ed.
Thank you, Representative Pulowski. And I know that my door has been darkened on this issue as well. So thank you for considering all of that. I know our chairs have heavy lifting. And I will say, I think that's a really good point as to why we have a budget resolution in front of us that spends money after what was a really great budget that took care of a lot of needs, but there are still things that we need to do with the investments we have here to make into programs that are exactly like what Representative Rarick. And I think we all wish we could do more, but our hope is that this spending is done wisely, that leaves our state in a good place for years to come, but takes care of those urgent needs like what Representative Rarick just described. And so I know our chairs have a heavy lift with their committees in front of us with putting their supplementals together, considering the needs of our communities and the resources we have in front of us. And I look forward to seeing those bills, as I know we all come through ways later this session. So further discussion to the budget resolution. With that, I will go to Lead Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you say that your finance chairs have a heavy lift? Like in terms of, did you mean it in the context of there's so much money you guys are spending that it's hard to pick it up? Is that what you meant by heavy lift?
Representative Garofalo, I meant sometimes there are just unmet needs, as a state with our targeted spending and with the amount we have that I think Representative Rarick highlighted. There are things we can do even after setting a really great state budget last year that our chairs are still going to have to make challenging decisions.
Okay, well, Madam Chair, obviously, I think last year was a massive increase in state spending. And just reviewing these numbers, I do have a couple questions for the budget resolution, and I don't know if you want to take these questions or if you want to defer to Ms. Adrian's. I'll leave that at your discretion. But you had mentioned the 512 figure for fiscal year 24-25 and additional general fund impact. Is there any restrictions on that being revenue increases or tax increases that are going to help meet that 512 number?
Representative Garofalo, I would say I would just point to line 24 of the spreadsheet that Ms. Adrian shared, that we do have funding within, we do have a budget target for our tax chairs. And I think, you know, a lot of the work will remain in their hands. There are some things that I think we will be focusing on that need to be done within the tax base. And we have a budget target for them below.
So, Madam Chair, so excluding the tax committee, the other committees, something that has been done in the past is they will raise non-tax revenue to achieve their budget target. So, for example, you have a committee that has $17 million general fund target. Well, what they'll do is they'll spend $40 million and then just raise $23 million in fees to hit the $17 million target. So, am I to understand that new fee increases are still there on the table for this budget resolution?
Representative Garofalo, I'm not saying either way. What I'm saying is what we lock in the budget resolution is the general fund spending. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you. And then specifically with the tax committee, and I believe Chair Gomez is on, it's the same situation where the tax committee target revenue tax increase revenue shows up as a negative number. So we see a number here of 53 million, but that would not preclude the tax chair from going out and raising a whole bunch of taxes again, like last year. Is there, does the tax chair want to respond to that? Or do you have any thoughts on whether we're going to be seeing, whether tax increases are embedded in that number?
Representative Garofalo, I think what I'll do is just answer, as I mentioned, the budget targets were set on Friday. The chairs were notified of those. What we are doing here is not making all of those decisions. We're just putting within the budget resolution the framework for the joint target agreement. And now the committees will work their processes. And so I know you could probably grill each chair or each spending area to want to know more details, but I think that is for the process to work in the days ahead. And so this is more talking about the framework that is from the joint budget targets, putting it into the budget resolution. So what you see out is spelled here is what we have. So we have not, you know, there's nothing more, like you see where we went into more detail, like where we call out the educator pensions, the claims bill, the Tyler sentiment. That is where we have agreed at the leadership level within the joint targets to spend money. And other places will have more discretion of chairs, more or less in some areas. And so that's still to be worked out.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, that is concerning on multiple levels, given the what is the largest increase in government spending across the nation last year. That is concerning. And I just want to I want to take a minute here just to share a quick document with people in the presentation here. What I'm sharing right now is this is from the February budget forecast. And what we can see is this is fiscal year 24 and 25, the current budget that we're in. And we can see right here and you can see my screen, Madam Chair, correct?
I can, but I'm questioning how we have anybody have screen sharing ability right now, because that is a little concerning. So I don't know if you approved that with the committee administrator already, and I just wasn't aware, but I guess it would be helpful to notify before someone screen shares, but proceed, Representative Garofalo, because this is an MMB document.
Okay, yes. and I can be trusted with screen sharing abilities. And even if I wasn't, I'm a network engineer. I could figure out how to do it, but that's okay.
Okay.
I'll just add
And
that.
normally, yeah, Representative Graffle, I will let you proceed, but it would be helpful if anything you're going to provide to the committee, you just provide ahead or goes into our committee packets, but you can proceed so long as this is the extent of it. Representative Graffle.
I assure you there will be no collegiate photos of members from the committee being shared on the committee, the web stream. This is the only document I'm sharing. So, and that applies more to me.
Representative Graffle.
Thank you. So what we see here, members, is for fiscal year 24 and 25, general fund spending, this is from the February forecast, is 70.5 billion. This is pre-budget resolution change. When we look in the tails, we can see that right now we are assuming that there's going to be a $4.3 billion reduction in general fund spending. These are just the assumptions that are being used for the upcoming budget that we can see ahead, the budget that begins next year. What is happening with the budget resolution we're seeing before us, assuming that there are not tax increases built into it, is we're going to see this spending number jump up over $71 billion. So now we are assuming that next year's legislature, regardless of who's in the majority, is going to reduce general fund spending by $4.5 billion. Those are the assumptions that are being used. So obviously, this is a fiscal cliff that is being created. Obviously, this is very, very concerning. The current legislature is now on track to increase the general fund spending by 37.5%. 37.5% in one budget. And yet we are supposed to believe in the next budget that we're going to be seeing a $4.5 billion reduction. And keep in mind, this is with inflation already built into the forecast. Embedded in these numbers, you can see right here is the $842 million figure. So the revised number for the tails is going to be about $66.35 billion. And this amount of money, it is just simply not realistic to assume that this governor and what is likely to be a DFL majority in the Senate are going to go from a 37.5% increase in spending to a $5 billion reduction in spending. This is completely unsustainable. We do not have the money to do this. There are certainly reprioritizations that need to take place in the existing appropriations from last year. And our side of the aisle is more than willing to help out in doing that. But the idea that the government of Minnesota doesn't have enough money and is not spending enough money and needs to do more is simply not in conjunction with the mathematical reality. And as we can see here with these numbers, these are MMB numbers listed out on our screen right now. Okay, this is the projected general fund spending in the tails. This number right here is going to be going up by over $500 million. It's going to take the general fund to $71 billion, a $71 billion general fund budget that we're assuming is going to get reduced in the tails. This is setting Minnesota up for a very, very disruptive budget cycle after the election. Now, Madam Chair, you and I aren't going to have to deal with that because we ain't going to be here. But members need to realize that we are being, the next year's legislature is being set up for a very challenging fiscal situation. And a $5 billion reduction in spending, I just don't see a Democrat administration proposing that. I think this is setting the scale for some massive tax increases. And for that and other reasons, I'll be voting no on this budget resolution. And I would encourage those who are inclined to understand math to do the same thing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Garofalo. And I don't see any more discussion, so I'll just offer a few comments before we vote here. That we are, the budget resolution locks in 24-25 spending. The sheet that Ms. Adrian's pointed to shows the tail spending of 26-27. And to Representative Garofalo's point, I think the leadership reflection in the joint targets very much understands the reality of what we're walking into. All of us were at the forecast briefing, the joint hearing, where we heard from MMB what was looming. And even though I know, to Representative Rarick's point, there are a lot of unmet needs. And we talked about, the money we have that we see coming in that perhaps could be spent, but it would leave us in a really dire situation. And so what you see in front of us is a prioritization of high needs like what Representative Rarick was talking about, while also balancing the future of our state's budget. So even though those of us retiring may not be here, I think a number of us care deeply about the budget we set last year, and we want to make sure that we can continue to follow through on those priorities and those investments we made, knowing that we had a lot of one-time money. I think you illustrated that really well, Representative Garofalo, that when we set our state budget last year, many of the chairs had to work through the complexity of spending one-time money, doing as much good as they can, knowing that moving forward, we wouldn't have as much. And so it's a very responsible supplemental budget that both balances what we see coming on the horizon while also prioritizing needs and reflections of what Minnesotans need from us in this supplemental. So I'm really proud of the work we're doing and will continue to do. And that this is just the beginning now of the budget bills that will come forward. And I look forward to diving in and seeing these spending priorities within these parameters as we continue on. And so with that, I think I will just move the adoption of budget resolution coded Bud Res 04, and I will have Ms. Killian take the roll.
Chair Olson,
Aye.
Olson, aye. Vice Chair Edelson,
Aye.
Edelson, aye. Lead Garofalo,
Garofalo, no.
Garofalo, no. Representative Acom,
Acom, aye.
Acom, aye. Representative Agbaje,
Agbaje, aye.
Agbaje, aye. Representative Becker Finn,
Aye.
Becker Finn, aye. Representative Freiberg, Freiberg, aye. Representative Gomez,
Gomez, aye.
Gomez, aye. Representative Hassan, Representative Heinzman,
Heinzman, no.
Heinzman, no. Representative Hornstein,
Steen, aye.
Hornstein, aye. Representative Howard,
Howard, aye.
Howard, aye. Representative Cleaborn,
Cleaborn, aye.
Cleaborn, aye. Representative Kreshaw is excused. Representative Liebling is excused. Representative Lilly,
Aye.
Lilly, aye. Representative Mueller,
Mueller, aye.
Mueller, aye. Representative Nash,
No.
Nash, no. Representative Noor,
No, aye.
Noor, aye. Representative Novotny,
Novotny, no.
Novotny, no. Representative Pulowski,
Pulaski, aye.
Pulowski, aye. Representative Petersburg,
Petersburg, no.
Petersburg, no. Representative Farr,
Bar, no.
Farr, no. Representative Pinto,
Aye.
Pinto, aye. Representative Rarick,
Rarick, no.
Rarick, no. Representative Schumacher,
Schumacher, no.
Schumacher, no. Representative Scott,
No.
Scott, no. Representative Joachim,
Yes.
Joachim, aye. And Representative Hassan, Hassan, aye. Madam Chair, there are 17 ayes, 9 noes, and 2 excused.
There being 17 ayes and 9 nays, the motion prevails and the budget resolution has been adopted.